Well, thank you, Kim, and welcome everybody. We've got quite a few attendees signed in, so we'll get going. And it looks like Facebook is cooperating and Zoom together, so yay. It's a major victory to get all that going. My name is Rita Fromholt, and I am Kim's campaign manager. I have the privilege of having worked with Kim. We started actually about January when the first conversation we had about this, and we were all set to go and have a big launch in March, and then guess what happened? COVID happened, and so we were on hold for 3 months, and now we're running a post-COVID campaign throughout the summer. We can't host any in-person or live events, which is unfortunate. We can't see anyone in person, so we're hosting a whole series of these Zoom webinars as an opportunity for people to get to know Kim and some of the issues that she's passionate about. So thanks very much for joining us. And we're looking forward to the campaign being over and Kim being crowned the next leader of the BC Green Party. So as I said, I'm Rita Fromholt, and I'm her campaign manager. And I first met Kim in 2014. We were both working members of the BC Green Party's Provincial Council. And even back then, I was immediately impressed by her enthusiasm for the party, all it stands for, and her determination to use her involvement with the party to create real, lasting change for the people in her community and all across the province. And as we all know, jumping into politics is not an easy game, and it's not something that anyone takes lightly. Kim stands apart from any of the other candidates I've worked with over the years, not the least of which is that she really, really wants this. She didn't have to be talked into it by anybody. She feels very drawn to play a leadership role in BC politics with the BC Green Party, and she doesn't shy away from the tremendous challenge this presents to her personal and her professional life. She has passed the control of her highly successful, award-winning mortgage consulting business to others to manage while the leadership campaign is on. This is allowing her to dedicate 100% of her time to running the best campaign possible and reaching as many members and supporters with her message of hope and change as she can. And unlike the other leadership contestants, Kim has deep roots in the BC Green Party, being an active and proud member for the past 6 years. She served on Provincial Council as Vice Chair and Secretary, and also Chair of the Governance Committee, the HR Committee, and all sorts of other committees. She's filed all our filings with the societies, people in the government. She's done just a bit of everything. She's hired and different executive directors. She's been involved through the highs and lows of the parties over the last few years. And the party recognized her volunteer achievements of 3 different service awards in 2016, 2017, and 2019. She's taken leave from Provincial Council to run in this leadership race. Kim also has political experience, having run in the 2017 provincial election as the BC Green Party MLA candidate for Powell River Sunshine Coast, where her team doubled the party's 2013 vote share. And she plans to run again and win in 2021. Or sooner perhaps, if the election comes sooner. And she also is the founder of her local riding association. And on top of all this, she has found time to be active in her community in several leadership positions, including serving as the president of her local Chamber of Commerce, co-chair of Community Futures and Loans Investment Committee, and co-founder of the Workforce Affordable Housing Society. Having this strong background with the BC Greens, politics, and community advocacy, she'll be able to hit the ground running and lead the party into the next election with a stellar slate of candidates. In uncertain times like those we find ourselves living in these days, to me, Kim personifies the kind of leadership our province and the world needs more of. I'm honored to work with a leadership candidate with such integrity, motivation, passion, and grit. Please welcome my friend, Kim Darwin.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you for saying yes to being my campaign manager. We've done some really good work together over the years. So before I start, I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Michell Nation. And clean technology, renewable energy, and green retrofitting have been some of my favorite topics. So, we all hear about needing to transition our economy to a clean, inclusive, and just one. But if we don't create the structures that we need to transition to, we're never going to get there. So some of you will know that I was the president of my local Chamber of Commerce for a number of years, which is a little bit odd to be green in, the chamber organization. But during the time that I was there, it annoyed the heck out of me when the BC Chamber of Commerce would issue press release that said, you know, we support Enbridge, we support wood fiber. And I'd contact the then president and say, well, I don't support those things. And why don't we hear anything about supporting clean technology and renewable energy? And I was always told that it was because it wasn't in our policy manual. So boy, I learned that members could actually write policy for the BC Chamber that then would be given to the provincial and federal governments. I found out a week before the deadline for the 2017 policy session. And I thought, if I can only write one policy, what is it going to be? And I decided it was going to be on clean technology and renewable energy, and calling on the provincial government to invest in clean technology and renewable energy. So I drafted it up really quickly, and then I had to work with the policy committee to articulate the message, to put the wording in a fashion that would be more acceptable to the audience. I presented it at the 2015 policy session in Prince George, and lo and behold, the membership adopted it. It remained on the books for 4 years. It actually expired last year, and I regret to say that I didn't keep it alive. But I also then nationalized it and took it to the Canadian Chamber, because neither one of these organizations had anything to support clean technology and renewable energy, which are the jobs for the future. So I took it to Ottawa also in 2017, and after much negotiation with the Alberta Chamber Caucus, who didn't really appear to want this on the Chamber books, I also had it passed there. So what my goal is to shift what British Columbians think of when they hear the words jobs and economy, and have the BC Green Party be the leading political party in the economic transition that we need to adopt to meet our climate targets, to tackle social inequalities, to move towards authentic reconciliation, all the while putting food on the table. We can bring the yes to the no that we've been branded with for all these years. So I am so thrilled to introduce our 2 guest speakers. I'm going to start off with Chief Patrick Michell. So Chief Patrick Michell is the member of I'm going to try this. Your cousin tried to help me with pronouncing this. Neshlakapna Nation, and has lived in British Columbia's Fraser Canyon all his life. Patrick has an administrative management diploma from Douglas College and a Bachelor of Law. After working in Vancouver with Department of Fisheries and Oceans and Indian and Northern Affairs in Canada, Patrick articled with the Ministry of Attorney General and Richards Buell Sutton before being called to the bar in 1997. Patrick practiced law at the Fraser Canyon, until 2005, after which he became a full-time worker for the Koyuk Hydro Project in the role of community liaison, and then transitioned to the Community Economic Development Officer. And then with the retirement of Chief James Frank in the spring of 2015, Patrick became the chief of the Kanakuk Bar in the community's first election in 30 years. Since 1978, Patrick has been involved in all 5 phases of diverse renewable energy projects applicable within his communities and traditional territory. And I'm going to introduce Jay, and then we're going to have Patrick tell us about those amazing infrastructure projects. So Jay is the co-founder and director of the North America Carbon Free Group. He's an executive who influences senior leaders to move beyond theory and to the practical application through innovating new technologies, training, and services. He designs and implements renewable energy, efficiency, and climate change strategies. He's a clean tech growth strategist, global macro trend specialist, and a champion of the low carbon economy. Recently, he finished his role as the executive director of the Clean Energy Association of BC and has co-founded Yes and More, a regenerative community development organization with a foot in Europe and North America. He's a guest lecturer on the University of British Columbia and the University of Birmingham MBA programs and the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership. He's also a board member of the Board of Change, and he sits on the steering group of the Global Association of Corporate Sustainability Officers and is a member of the Strategic Advisory Council and the Climate Change and Energy Working Group at the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. I am so thrilled to have both of you with us this evening, and I'm going to open it up to Patrick to tell us about the incredible things that his community is doing. And I think we're going to see if we can get a screen share to operate effectively here. So thanks so much, Patrick.
So I've got a screen here. It should say environment economy. Is that working? Excellent. So I've only put together a slide deck of 6. And because at the end of the day, Kanakabar's story, and I'll go to the next screen. Let's see if I've done this right. Next, didn't move. There we go. Kanakabar's story is online. Our lifelong learnings, for example, slide number 1 is CanPower, is Kanakabar's demand side management program that saw most of my membership's hydro bills go from 20 to 30% dip. One you guys will all have a laugh over is that I have an idea. Let's invest in what's called resiliency hubs, where every 300 kilometers in British Columbia is guaranteed water, food, shelter, and energy and communications. You want to bounce forward? Build resiliency centers. It's where you go in a forest fire. It's where you go. So all these things under lifelong learning, it's there. The business case for the Must Stop Rest Stop says for the first year, just so you guys know, for the first year, Kanakabar Indiban is going to put down on Highway 1 infrastructure that will lose $189,000 in the first year, but over the next 100 years will generate tons of jobs, taxes, and profits. If you're going to transition into the environment economy tomorrow, you simply must invest today. The second part of this slide shows the presentations. If anybody can't read that, I'm doing a presentation tomorrow at noon called Is There a Business Case for Energy Efficiency? I update my website almost daily. Do you? So here, you guys have a cheat. This is a presentation I'm doing tomorrow that clearly states there's a 5-process business case for energy efficiency in British Columbia, creating, again, jobs, taxes, economy for the next 100 years. It doesn't involve a pipeline. It doesn't involve, mining, forestry. So the Fraser Canon, just so you guys know, if you don't know, guarantees all third parties negative return on investment. The only developer is us. That second slide only shows up to 26. Apparently there are 61 presentations we've done. So again, I'm not necessarily going to share. There are video clips. There is our a dedicated climate change section. Right? What the point I want to make here is, in this document here on the right-hand side here, is that what we're seeing here is by 2050, climate change is going to bring potentially our economy to zero or potentially negative. Now, there's a book written a few years ago called, where is it called? Waken the Frog, where that prediction was made. This is a few years ago. So we all know what's coming. So what are we going to do about it? Our water systems, our transportation systems, our energy, our business, our governments are all vulnerable. What are we going to do? This is here. Kanakabar, to the best of our ability, has been meeting with ministers, meeting with the premier. We're writing, we're participating. Hi, everybody. This is a forum. We update the website. This here is clearly an image. We're all concerned about COVID-19. I am too. I'm vulnerable, so is my wife. So we've increased social distancing. We maintain aggressive physical distancing here at my office. Don't come here unless you have pre-approval and basically have prepared to buy. So we are now facing this incredible crisis. And of course, obviously, the federal government is in a huge deficit. I don't know what our provincial government's plan is. For us, we hired more people. COVID-19 generated more jobs. I currently have 54 people working for me in the middle of nowhere in the agricultural industry, in the renewable energy sector, in energy efficiency. So what I find here is that Kanakabar has been doing and preparing for the environment and economy of tomorrow for 30 years. Just nobody wants to necessarily listen. So I'm hoping that the participants and Kim and all will look at this, because we already know what to do. Will we bounce forward or bounce back? We know that Minister McKenna has announced $170 billion in economic stimulus funding, but has she actually funded anything? We know that Premier John Horgan has announced $1.5 billion in economic stimulus funding. I'm still waiting to see if he's going to fund anything. Here at Kanaka Bar, we have shovel-ready, shovel-worthy projects. We can guarantee from Lytton to Boston Bar water for the next 100 years. What I need is $3.1 million in third-party supports, and I can have it done by March 31st. Without it, it's going to take me about 3 years. I can put up the must stop, rest stop, and these are just examples. When you go onto the website, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you're prepared to make the strategic investments in proactive, resilient systems, will be okay. When COVID-19 hit, we went, oh, what's happening? So there was a bit of a rush caused by the TP. All I did was remind my membership that our ancestors survived for 8,000 years without TP and will survive the next little bump without it as well. When we decided to take back our future, we started in 1978 looking at economic development, and we saw everything that was wrong on the colonial model. We invested in the renewable energy sector. In 1990, we applied for a water license. In 2000, we advanced forward, and in 2006, we got an electricity purchase agreement. In 2014, that hydro project came online. So we did it through a 2006 EPA that sees me receive approximately 7 cents per kilowatt hour, and BC Hydro sells it back to me at 9 cents at step 1 and 14 cents at step 2. I have no idea how my project is bankrupting BC when BC Hydro is buying my electricity at one rate and selling it back to me as a profit to them. So I've got some challenges with this myth and misinformation that's out here. With a hydro project, I now am one of the only bands, if not the only band, that has no suicide. I have no children in care, on and off reserve. I have no social assistance. I do have people in SA. I have 100% graduation, and I have 100% employment. Plus, I have 100% rent collection. All this without an economy. No, without the colonial economy. By investing strategically in resilient systems. So we now have 12 operating solar projects. We have 2 wind towers. I can barely sit down there and constrain myself. I can't share 36 years of learning in a very short time frame. But I know that this is the time. It was Greta Thunberg just a couple of days ago who said we've squandered years thinking about stuff. We know what was announced in 1988. We know what was announced in 1992, and we've known what's announced since then. What we're looking for, though, is decisions. Now, I heard Kim say at the beginning that I became the first chief in, I think, 30 plus years. And I'm not disagreeing with you, Kim, on this. Do you know when I face recall? Every 30 days. Every 30 days, my community wants to hear what I did over the last 30 days, what I'm doing over the next 30 days. And if I've done a good job, I get another 30-day mandate. I face recall every 30 days. In our traditional form of government, we don't suffer fools. If you're not doing a good job, go on and we'll put somebody else in. So I sit down and I listen to my beneficiaries. I don't manage for the 1%. I don't manage for the 1% over here or the squeaky wheels. I manage the community as requested for the overall betterment of the community as a whole. And the number one barrier to my economic development and all my initiatives is to make sure that my children and my grandchildren have the same as, if not more, opportunity than we do today. The colonial model introduced benefits for wallets today at the expense of future generations. Don't have a solution. I hope that there will be a solution moving forward for British Columbia. I invite all of you to just review what Kanaka Bar is doing. Direct your questions to Kim. No, I'm just kidding, Kim. I'll take the questions. Because Kanaka Bar said is information is power, and what we've done is online. We encourage all British Columbians to right-click and steal. Read the presentation I'm going to speak to tomorrow, and you'll see Kanaka Bar's story is replicable in corporations, by municipalities, by individuals, by families, by entrepreneurs. Anybody can do what Kanaka Bar is doing. The only thing is you need to stop what you're doing and start thinking differently. So Kim, thank you very much for this opportunity to share. because I do wish yourself, the Green Party of BC, as well as today's participants, just have a look. Please try to understand what we're doing, because I can't wait for the governments to make the right decision. I have a mandate to ensure that my grandchildren are okay. So
Thank you so
very
much, Patrick. And you know, this is why I was so excited to have you on, because you're just doing it. You're not waiting for the government to get things in order. You're just doing it for your community, and there's really no reason why we shouldn't be able to move forward with, you know, this alternative life that we all really want to have. So I think you need to stop your screen sharing. Oh, we see somebody's working on a house there. So we'll see if you go up to the top and stop your screen sharing there. Oh, there is part of your food resiliency. We're getting that too. So that's something else that the Kanaka Bar Band has really been working on as well. So there's a number of YouTube videos about their food resiliency projects as well. So becoming pandemic proof, I think.
I think somebody needs to hijack my computer, because I don't know how to blow you up.
If you go up to the very top of the screen, it should say stop screen sharing. There we go. All right. Now I'm really excited. Jay, this is your area of expertise, and I understand that you do most of your work not in North America so much because there isn't quite the interest here yet.
Yeah, in many ways. I spent about 20 years in Europe working in the sustainability space. So after I graduated from my undergrad degree at SFU in geography, it was quite clear back in the mid-90s in Canada, there wasn't much work in the sustainability and environmental space unless you wanted to work in environmental impact assessments that nobody would pay attention to. So it was one trip to London in the UK, and I noticed one of the big newspapers had a little section called Jobs in Environment, and it was 20 pages long. And for me, it was this revelation of, wow, there's a whole world out there. And in Europe, environment is mature. So it made complete sense to focus efforts over there. And that's where I spent 20 odd years. And what's very interesting is coming back to Canada 5 years ago, I came back in time 15 to 20 years, because how we're still stuck in the resource curse model. Canada and Australia are the only two first world countries left to derive the majority of their income from primary resource extraction. And what is interesting here is that when you don't add value to your resources by going into manufacturing or value-added industries, you're 100% at risk for commodity price volatility. Alberta is a perfect example with what's happened with the oil industry. Is when you sell oil, you have 100% risk with the price of oil. When you turn oil into gasoline or diesel, you've reduced your exposure by about 50%. When you turn it into something like plastic, you've reduced it by about 85%. When you turn oil into pharmaceuticals, you've reduced it by 99%. So there are reasons why that model isn't followed in the rest of the G10. Is because it's too exposing. And it also, unfortunately, and this is my own personal observation, when countries base so much of their income off of tearing stuff out of the ground and selling it to other people, there's, to be frank, nowhere near as much of an incentive to innovate. You generally tend to become quite conservative and quite risk averse in that environment, because it's stead you well. You've made a lot of money off selling logs, off selling ore, off selling food, off selling oil. So therefore, well, what's the incentive to do something more complex? Now, what's interesting is if you look at Europe, which had to obviously go through a lot, especially after 2 world wars. It had to rebuild and reinvent itself. It had to create the European Union, which was a management model designed to prevent conflict, and it had succeeded phenomenally well at that. It was about trying to find a new path forward, and because of that, environment naturally swung in, and so did sustainability a lot earlier on. And now it's embedded into public procurement, it's embedded into government thinking, it's embedded into the average person. When you buy an electrical good, a washing machine, a television, it's got a little rating on it, which tells you its performance, A through G. A is great, G is bad. It tells you how much money it costs to use the item in electricity. It tells you how much carbon emissions. When you buy a house, when you rent an apartment, same thing. They've made it much more easy and accessible. And so that's the sort of stuff why now a lot of my work is still in Europe, because if you're working in clean tech innovation and the next generation of what's coming, then you want to be in the place that's already fertile to grow it. And what Patrick's done at Kanaka Bar with many other people there, a phenomenal job of walk the walk, don't talk the talk. When it comes to how governments manage things, a lot of European governments were forced to do a lot of sustainable stuff because of collective agreement across the EU. Many individual governments didn't want to lead and jump ahead because it was going to be harder on some of their industries. But as a collective group, there was more of a momentum to keep things moving in that direction. In 2000, there was a 20-20-20 rule created, which is by 2020, every single item sold in the EU has to have 20% more energy efficiency, have a 20% lower impact, and 20% more recyclability. So that set the force for over 450 million people, spending 1.3 times as much money as the United States does, because the EU is a bigger economy than the United States or China, which people seem to misunderstand. That economy suddenly created a ripe environment for people to constantly innovate, and there was a place for it to be sold. And so that's why much of my effort is still there. There's a lot going on here too. What I would say is there are some innovations, some transformative innovations that are coming out of Canada and British Columbia that can change the world. These are part of the things I call the 1%ers. Things that kind of change 1% of global challenges, 1% of global emissions, 1% of pollution problems, 1% of social housing issues, 1% of food challenges. So these are big, big solution providers. And we've got a handful here that can change the world, and some of which already are beginning to. And that's what's exciting. And I've gone from a background of working in local government in the UK to working in the European Union, to working in association management like Clean Energy British Columbia, also in the private sector, the small business sector. Spent a lot of time sort of cascading my career over all different elements, because what I've been looking for the whole way along is best practices, solutions, and how do you apply them in the real life situation. Academia, ironically, is a place I've spent very little time, even though I've been teaching at Cambridge. But I've been teaching at Cambridge very much like Patrick has, which is about telling people about the path you want, not talking about theory, but rather talking about what you've done. And that, I think, is so vital, because in a world of hyper complexity, we have never had more specialists and never had more educated humans than we do right now. And I'm not just talking about volume, I'm talking as a percent. There's never been more degree holders, but collectively we are, as a species, struggling against probably 9 or 10 macro indicators, which all have the capacity to decrease the quality of our species' existence. So what I'm trying to say there is that even with all of our knowledge and education and experience, the human race right now is coming up with an F grade when it comes to survivability. And that is important to be able to see the truth behind that, because if we don't see that truth, then we can actually put too much belief in the systems around us. We start to believe that this is how the world should be, this is how finance should be run, this is how government should be run, this is how society needs to function. The reality is there is no compatibility with any of our current models and our happiness as a species, which is just incredible that we still are struggling with that basic concept. And there's a little image I'm going to do a quick share screen on, which I think is really quite useful to show what it can, a little image of what I think is interesting. This one didn't work. Sorry about that. It's the wrong share. It's coming up everywhere but the one that I want. Okay, well then I won't share it because it doesn't want to share. The image is basically of a comparison of global international climate finance spending versus global military spending in the G7. And what we basically see there is that the military spending in the G7 is about 48 times as much money as the international spending on climate. And the reason why that matters is because it highlights to us how our spending is completely inverse with the risk. The money we're putting into military is actually this low risk. The money we're putting into climate is this high risk. So they're completely oppositional, which is, I think, really, really interesting. There's more money to be made from the climate initiative, from the green jobs, from the green economy than any existing economy. We know that. The evidence is present everywhere. And if you want to look at the examples of that, you can see how 30 of the total largest global fund managers at over 30 trillion US dollars under management have now committed to investing their money in things that support the sustainable development goals instead of things that contravene them. That is a gigantic shift. Mark Carney is now stepping out of his World Bank job, and he's going into Brookfield as a senior VP of environmental governance and standards. That is a tremendous thing, because what you're seeing there is a senior executive attaching his horse to the cart of one of the biggest fund management groups. And if they don't step up and produce what he thinks is necessary, he's going to walk away. But that organization has done great. They put huge amounts of money into renewable energy. We want to talk about renewables. Well, we're in a weird situation in BC, which we'll get into in more detail, but it is easier to build a wind turbine in Syria than it is in British Columbia. We have created an incredibly complex regulatory framework here that is completely disproportional to risk or benefit. And it puts us in a position where British Columbia currently has not got the systems in place to benefit from the renewable revolution that is already here. We're holding it back. And by the way, Alberta is leaping ahead of us. They have done a phenomenal job in creating the first capacity marketplace in Canada, which means you can make money from selling energy storage to the grid, capacity management. So there's a business case for batteries in Alberta. There isn't anywhere else in Canada currently. So they're starting to pioneer some things. Alberta's pioneering carbon capture and storage. It's actually looking at the hydrogen economy in a much bigger way than British Columbia is. So even though Alberta is a very poor performer on climate, it actually has some fertile ground to grow some of the innovations which are the way of the future, much more so than British Columbia does. But these are choices we've made because of politics. BC has made use of 0.0001% of its wind resources. We have not even touched solar in this province. We have a tiny smidgen of solar projects. And this means that we've got vast opportunity. And one of the biggest business opportunities in British Columbia is looking at the possibility of becoming the green powerhouse of the Cascadia region of North America, Washington, Oregon, and California, who are all transitioning and committing to gigantic CO2 reductions, many of which exceed BC's own goals. And they don't have the capacity to generate all that energy on their landmass easily because of higher density populations or not as good conditions when it comes to the generation opportunity. So we have got a massive options here. The question is, will we take them? Well, that's to be seen. And one of the things I want to end with is the George Bernard Shaw quote, which is, the reasonable man or person, if we were to modernize it, adapts themselves to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to themselves. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable. It is time to become unreasonable. Patrick has got a lifetime of unreasonableness. It is only the people who go out there and forge new ways in spite of the existing systems that take us to new places. It is the outlaws and the unreasonable people in our society who are the ones who push us. It is the leaders who take what they've done and start walking that path afterwards. So what we need more is a lot less leaders and a lot more unreasonable outlaws who have the goals of the bigger picture in mind. Granted, there's bad outlaws too.
That's so I often say we can, we can be leaders or we can be laggards in this new economy, and so far we're really not doing very well. But that, like you said, we have so many opportunities. And speaking of Mark Carney, I probably bastardized what he says, but he's been known to say that if you're operating a company or a business and you haven't thought about how you're going to get to net zero by 2050, you must just be thinking that you're going to run it into the ground, because there is no choice. We need to transition. And again, like I said at the beginning, we have to create the infrastructure, the projects, the jobs, so that we can transition to them. So I have a couple questions here, and then we are going to open it up to some of the questions in the Q&A there. But what, so we'll do this to Jay first. What are the biggest barriers and opportunities for electrification in BC?
Well, I wrote, when I was at the Clean Energy BC, I wrote the Electrification of British Columbia white paper, which was about creating a roadmap to how BC can meet its climate obligations and the Clean BC targets through extensive electrification. We've got a really green grid here. We're about 92% green in BC, not 99, as BC Hydro says. But it's 92 because we import dirty fossil fuel energy into our province from other regions as well. Under international reporting frameworks, you have to balance the whole thing out, but BC Hydro actually doesn't comply with international reporting, which is really interesting. Most people don't know this, but our province knowingly enables our energy provider to report on data that is non-compliant with our obligations under the Paris Climate Accord. And which is ridiculous. Our electricity is green. It's really green, but we don't pretend it's 99 when it's 92. So that's just one factor. We got a really green grid. How do we use that electricity? It's vital here, because 1/3 of every kilowatt of energy used in the province currently is in the form of electricity, and 2/3 is in the form of fossil fuels. So the only way to reduce our emissions by 50, 60, 70, 80, 100% is to transition those kilowatts of fossil fuels with emissions to kilowatts of non-emission energy. And that means more electricity. And that means more green electricity. That also means biofuels. That also means hydrogen. It means a whole bunch of other things. But what it in essence means is you have to go from emitting to not emitting. And what's really interesting here is in British Columbia, we have opportunities in our transport for electrification, we have opportunities in our industry for electrification, and we have opportunities in our heating of our homes, which are the main three areas. Now, home heating, heat pumps, that is the big route forward. Air source and ground source heat pumps are all the rage in Europe. They're very common. In fact, there's a lot of incentives in European countries to pay you to produce heat in your home from a renewable source like a heat pump instead of from another source. In fact, electric baseboard heating is banned in most European countries. Things that we consider average here in BC, they're illegal over there because it's the worst thing you can do on their grid, because most European grids are high emission, coal-based, oil-based, natural gas-based. So they don't want you to use electricity to heat. They want you to use other things to heat, or heat pumps to heat. So we got a big opportunity with heat pumps. Now, think about this. The company that's going to benefit the most from installing heat pumps is BC Hydro. It's going to shift kilowatts of fossil heat to kilowatts of electric heat. So BC Hydro, to be frank, should be the primary driver for heat pump installation. They should be following European models where European energy companies, for instance, British Gas in the UK, derives about 15% of its income from maintaining gas boilers, because they understand that's a big marketplace. We shouldn't just sell them gas. We should also maintain all of those boilers and all those furnaces. So they do it that way. BC Hydro could easily become a major installer of heat pumps and a maintainer of heat pumps because it facilitates the business model. But that's not how it works. Here's a tiny grant. And the tiny grant you get in BC is totally inconsequential compared to what it costs to install the system. So the incentive system is out of whack. Transportation, we've got a bunch of big targets in BC for electrifying our vehicles. They're happening a lot faster than anything the government is saying. So the government set a target for a certain percentage of EV, knowing that target would be exceeded 5 years in advance of the target. That's not a pushing target. It's not a pulling target. It's a following. And that is not what you need to derive that change. The biggest opportunity to reduce emissions in British Columbia from transport doesn't sit in the cars. It actually sits in the light and medium duty trucks. That's more than 80% of our total emission reduction possibilities from electrification. So these are 1 to 15 to 20 ton vehicles that often do less than a few hundred kilometers a day worth of travel. If you go to Vancouver Port, you will find gigantic fleets of small vans and medium-sized vans driving all around the Lower Mainland. 1920s electric milk floats with lead acid batteries could do that job right now. So this is stuff that can happen right away. And then when it comes to industry, electrification of industry is huge. There's many applications in that space. And we would need to more than triple our electricity grid production in this province to have any chance of meeting our clean BC plans. So there's a huge amount more energy going to be required, and there's a huge amount more energy going to be needed in different areas than it currently is being used.
Yeah, so you just answered my third question there about the likelihood of us meeting our climate targets, which is pretty slim to none on the path that we're on. Also,
it's zero. There is no chance. We cannot hit our climate targets with the brand new LNG industry in this province not being electrified. And the government has made the decision to not require electrification across the entire thing, LNG, upstream, downstream, everything. And they made that decision to not do it. And what we're doing is being saddled with this giant thing that's going to give us 15 to 25 million tons a year of extra emissions for the next 40 years. And the total emissions of this province is 62. You can't add that to our deck and reduce all of this by 80%. It's just simply impossible. This is not opinion, it's math.
Yeah, exactly. So you actually answered the couple of questions that I had for you. I also wanted to, Patrick, the impact on your community from these renewable energy projects that you have been putting in over the last several years. What is the percent of the people in your community that have jobs as a result of this?
Oh, I don't necessarily. So let's put it this way. In 2015, there were 6 people working for the band. There's 54 now. What's changed? The revenue streams from the renewable energy project that we've constructed, the one that took 30 years to do. We take those revenue streams. Our model is simple. If the money stays in town, it's spent in town. So the revenues that come are reinvested. Our membership participate in the design of the solar, then our membership install the solar, and then our membership basically maintain the solar. As for the wind tower, as for the weather gauging stations, as the water gauging stations. As a result, we still have the same 6 people doing the basic, again, without disparaging it, basically administering ISC and First Nations Health Authority program and services dollars. The other 48 people are working because of our transition. Our energy efficiency program, right, has generated a massive amount of people in renovations, right? We're getting rid of the wood fire, the furnaces, and replacing with air source heat pumps. Why? Because we're generating electricity. So if the power goes out, your house doesn't have to be without power. So again, as you look at this, we're not there yet because we have a limited amount of resources, and it's money. That's what I'm saying here is at the end of the day, with an own source revenue budget of about $1.5 million a year all in, we can only do so much at some time. 17 houses have now been completely renovated to whatever code you want to call it. We went from 10 air evacuations per hour down to 4. We did it. We take out the windows, we put in the new windows. We did everything we could to make sure that each home, and the thing is, we didn't do it because it's a profit model. We did it so the residents can benefit from a reduced hydro bill. So we take the revenues and flip it back into capacity development, knowledge transfer, and training. So for us, we have the capacity to do solar design and install for other communities, but other communities aren't embracing it. We've asked BC Hydro, do you mind if we put up what's called an island? So we have enough solar, wind, and hydro resources here, forget about the biomass and geothermal, to power Lytton, to Hope, And of course, BC Hydro wants no competition. So as a result, when BC Hydro's grid goes down, Kanaka's lights stay on.
Wow,
So we have
that's
it in
awesome.
the island. So we've been advocating for 7 years, smaller scale diversification, so that if our big grids go down, British Columbians don't have to go without electricity. We still have to deal with BC Hydro because their response to independent power and diversification was, if I recall, Bill 17, let's import our electricity from the United States. Well, that went nowhere. To the point was, let's make sure that no British Columbians, be they Indigenous, be their families, be their corporations, or be the municipalities, generate enough electricity to be a competitor for BC Hydro. So I believe that BC Hydro needs to work with us, but they seem to be working against us.
Right.
So I'm really distraught somewhat about the lack of the shift in energy. As
Yeah.
Jay was talking about, we have this incredible opportunity. If you look, we're planning to put up electric vehicle charging stations here at Kanaka Bar that's battery stored. So when the grid goes down, why does my transportation system have to fail? I've asked successive ministers to invest in monorail transportation systems for both manufacturing, produce, and people. Instead, we get more diesel consuming trucks. So it's not that we can't. I'm struggling here because we seem to not want to make the shift. I've approached mines and said, hey, look, why are we using rock trucks to haul your ore up? Why can't we put up electric conveyor belts? Well, there's no motivation. So I've really been struggling with the inability to make the shift. I know that other people like myself, I mean, I'm a proud British Columbian. I want British Columbia to be the lean green machine.
Exactly.
So far, gee, that's awful because it's like a Green Party message.
Well, I like it. I like it. We're actually going to open up. I think we have some questions here. We want to give our audience a chance to interact because, you know, we can't do anything in person these days because of COVID, and this is about as good as it gets. So I love your passion. And Rita, if we can open it up to a couple of questions here.
Yeah, we've had a few things come in through the Q&A. The first one is from Lois, and she's saying California is experiencing challenges with alternative energy meeting their current demands. It seems a big part of the challenge is storage of alternative energy power. What are your thoughts on the solutions to this? Climate change will make the storage challenge more important, I think.
It absolutely will. I mean, what's interesting is, and alternative energy is a hilarious word. Wind and sun's been here a hell of a lot longer than burning fossil fuels. It's like organic food is alternative. Actually, mainstream commercial food production with chemicals is not alternative. That's the alternative. It's the other way around. And what is funny here is, yeah, California's got some huge challenges. A, they're going to massively decarbonize. B, they've got ridiculous impacts from climate change. They're having to have rolling blackouts and power outages because in those temperatures that they've been experiencing, you actually have the power lines causing fires at the distribution level. And also then you have a big fire, you can lose a bunch of infrastructure. So California's got some big challenges. What is also interesting is they've got a huge amount of solar energy, which is producing a lot of electricity at the peak of the daytime when they have the least amount of demand. So storage is an essential and integral piece of this puzzle. Storage is getting cheaper. It's getting more varied. There's a lot of options. California is anticipating that by 2035, they're going to have 10 gigawatts of batteries running around on the roads and electric vehicles. Intelligent grids are starting to understand that is the equivalent of having 9 Site C dams worth of peak capacity sitting there rolling around on your roads. And by the way, 80% of those vehicles aren't moving at any given time. So if you have a smart grid management system, you can use that resource to deal with peak problems and peak demands in your grid locally. That's what is happening in the UK. UK had the first vehicle to grid tariff in existence. So that means you get paid if your electric car is sitting in your driveway plugged into the grid and the grid needs that power. You can say, I'm going to allocate 20% of my battery to the grid for peak shaving, and you get paid 4 times as much money for that energy than you paid to buy it in the first place. It's a smart business model. And this is the thing about business. This is all comes down to economic instruments. If you devise a system where it actually costs you less to do good than you did to do bad, then people will shift without having to convince them of the ethics and the morality of it. So forget about trying to change people. I've given up after 30 years of giving hundreds of talks. I don't care about people's opinions anymore. I don't care at all. What I care about is shifting behavior. And the way to shift people's behavior is you make it easier for them. You make it more financially beneficial for them. And then maybe win a couple of hearts and minds. If you get them, great. But I don't care about the 25% of population who will never change their behavior or thinking. Forget them. Let's just make it cheaper for them to do the right thing. And then don't even tell them it's the right thing.
Yeah,
That's
money,
the big piece of it.
Money talks.
It does. And one of the questions lower down, I'll quickly answer if you don't mind, because it relates to this. And that is the economic instruments that have been created in best practice examples around the world. There's a German bank called KfW. KfW is a government-owned bank. What they are given is money for the bank to give to people for green mortgages. Now, green mortgages are things that implement in your dwelling, and this could be commercial, this could be private, where you basically increase energy efficiency. So insulation, better windows, new heating systems, solar panels, wind turbines, all that stuff. And what they do is you have to prove that your benefit to your home, whatever that benefit is, has to be at least 2.5 times what the interest rate is for the loan. The loans are given out dirt cheap, 1.5%, 2% interest rates. The whole point is the government doesn't use KfW Bank to make money. It uses KfW Bank to facilitate activity. So imagine if you only have to get a 5% return on investment on all those upgrades in your house in order to get that loan. That's very, very, very easy. In fact, a heat pump, even in BC, with our cheap gas and relatively cheap electricity, still has a payback period of probably around 8 to 10 years. That's an 8 to 12% return on investment. That's easy to do. So what's interesting here is the KfW Bank lends you the money, you do all this work, there's a whole bunch of jobs created as all this work's done, and then you got to pay back that loan. And that loan costs you less than half of your personal benefit every month. That means it's cost you nothing to do this. It's actually made you money to do this. So you might have €150 a month payment to your loan. Well, I just saved 350 every month because of what you've done in your house. That is the instrument. And by the way, that has been told to our government, federal and provincial government. I have brought this to them and they were all surprised, never hearing about it, and they never asked any further questions about it. Having worked with this, having done this in Europe, there seems to be a lack of interest in, to be honest with you, doing what other people have done. And I call it cut and paste. Don't redesign, don't run a pilot, copy, paste, just get on with it. And that is the piece here. Canada spends, as a government, if you all add up all government agencies, roughly around 5 to 8% of Canadian GDP is for public procurement. The Canadian government and the provincial governments are the single largest economic drivers in this country. As it comes to a business, think about what could happen if you just shift that to doing the good thing. It's really quite easy. And that's what public procurement has done in Europe, is government is the driver of innovation because they buy innovation. And guess what? The innovators who invented it in Europe make a lot of money by staying in Europe and paying taxes in Europe and having employees in Europe. What we do in Canada is the government gives a little bit of money to clean tech companies, and then they get big and they sell themselves, usually to the United States, and then they leave because we don't buy the innovation. We don't implement it here. Out of 20 clean tech businesses I'm working with in Canada, 19 of them have zero interest in the Canadian economy for their products. They're completely ignoring this country. They just happen to live here. And that is an utter failure of leadership and management.
That is terrible, and again, there are the opportunities for British Columbia. We're getting quite close to our time. It'd be great if we could have one more question, but I did want to mention, I wrote an article that just came out this week. You can find it at kimdarwin.ca under the issues tab that talks about this model of funding heat pumps that you've just described, and about the greatest opportunities for British Columbia to reduce our emissions. And most of it was written based on a lot of your information, Jay. So thanks for making that available through Clean Energy BC. Let's have one more question and hopefully maybe a short answer if possible. So Rita, if you can pick one of the questions there, and then I have, we'll close this evening so we can let everybody get on with their dinner.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions about Site C, but it just seems to me that that's such a can of worms. We'd probably need a couple hours to unpack that beast. But it is back in the news lately, and people are shaking their heads like, why are we carrying on with this? So maybe it's a question more for policy people and lawyers and how we untangle ourselves from that mess. But Adrienne Carr, who's on Vancouver Green City Councillor, she's got a good question about how do we actually get BC Hydro to increase the feed-in tariffs to incentivize people in communities to install renewable energy? And how do we help people in communities finance the installation of renewables and deep energy retrofits of buildings? For example, PACE financing, P-A-C-E, it looks like an acronym. How do we get both of these incentives in place fast? What do you think? I think we should elect a green government. That's what I think.
Well, and you know, the financing model that Jay just mentioned too, it's really a no-brainer, and most people know my day job, my paying job, I'm an independent mortgage broker, so this excites me. This is possible. This is something that Canada should be doing. And we don't have to recreate the wheel. This is the thing. Like Jay said, cut and paste. There are other jurisdictions who are already doing that. There are jurisdictions within our own province, like Patrick's community. They are doing what needs to be done. And somebody said that there's going to be no vaccine for climate change. So we need to get on it. You know, I think about our youth who are, you know, prior to COVID-19 have been marching, feeling like nobody's really looking out for them. Well, these are the opportunities. These are the decisions that we can make for their future. So I also, just before we close here today, thank you so much to our guest speakers. Thank you to everybody for sharing your evening with us. For those of you that don't know, I'm going to go through just a few things. Our all-candidate debate is scheduled for September 1st at 7:30 p.m. Also, please share that non-members can vote for the leader of the BC Greens. So if everybody on the call can find 5 people, get them to go to my website, kimdarwin.ca, scroll down to the purple tab there and register to vote. We really want this to be a fulsome democratic election, and it's going to be really exciting to see the result. We do have 3 great candidates, and I'm really excited for what we can bring into the next election, as well as you can go to kimdarwin.ca to read the issues tab on all of the articles that I've written on how we can rebuild a resilient British Columbia coming out of COVID-19. And, you know, everything revolves around money these days. If you have the ability to donate to my campaign, I'm not going to turn away your money. And Rita, did I forget anything in my little homework list here?
I think that's great, Kim. Really want to thank our panelists and everyone for tuning in tonight. Lots of information that's just scratching the surface of a really complex topic. And we need to be talking about it more and more. And I think what Jay said is just amazing. You know, they're doing this around the world in other places. It's not hard. We can just try some stuff. And also what Patrick's just doing in his community. We've got examples happening right here. So let's stop saying it's too hard or it's too expensive, and let's just do it.
Yeah, let's do it. And it's good for people. It's good for the planet. Let's just do it. It really is the yes to the no. And Patrick has an amazing video. Patrick, it's called The Next 1,000 Years, is it? I've watched it 3 times. I encourage anybody to watch it. So out of the number that you said, those 71, I was 3 of those people who have watched it. It is so encouraging. Yeah, you're just doing it. So again, thank you so much, Jay and Patrick, for being part of our panel tonight. Thank you to everybody who's joined us tonight, and don't forget to vote in the BC Green Party leadership election.
Thank you.
All right. Bye for now, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.